This is the OpenStack server cluster. There are 13 compute nodes, with 9 of them currently in use for resources. There's a hypervisor that sits in the middle, essentially acting as the brain of the operation. On the back of the OpenStack cluster, each server has 2 network interface cards, with one that connects to each switch on both the front and the back, with a physical WSUS server to serve each of the virtual machines for Windows updates, and the WSUS server, as well as the hypervisor, connect to this dummy switch, which serves as an uplink to the other switches. This is the OpenStack dashboard, where we can control the various virtual machines and other settings within OpenStack. You can go to my instances here and see all the running virtual machines and the various statuses of those virtual machines, such as IP addresses and other various information. In addition to that, we can also create new instances of virtual machines. We can choose the image, we can choose the size of a virtual machine, just like in AWS. We can choose to see whether it's a private or public network. We can choose security groups and even public and private key pairs as well. In addition to that, we can also take a look at the overview, and for instance, this is my quota, so I can see information regarding my quota. And lastly, this is the Volumes tab, where you can create virtual volumes which attach to the virtual machines and are seen as physical drives to the virtual machines as well. And these are the other images that we have, which are being queued or backed up or other things like that. This is my WSUS server, or Windows Server Update Services. This is the physical server that you saw in the previous video, and its primary function is to provide Windows updates to the virtual machines, since they technically cannot reach the outside world. Now, its first network interface card reaches out to the internet, and the second network interface card reaches back to the virtual machines on OpenStack. Now, in WSUS, all the machines that are connected via client-side targeting will be able to connect directly to WSUS to receive immediate updates. And this is my group called Tests that I made, and they client-side target themselves to join this group. This is just an old server that I had, so that's just going to get deleted. And that is the primary function of WSUS. This is my domain controller, whose function is to serve as the head of the domain and can control the various users on the domain, the various computers on the domain, as well as many other policies as well. And I can go in the Microsoft Management Console, and I can check out all the computers that are connected to the domain. And in addition to that, I can also take a look at the domain controller, which is right here. If there was more than one domain controller, you would see that there as well. And this is the list of all of the users on my domain, and I actually wrote a script, which I'll show in a little bit, that pulls all the first names and last names from the spreadsheet you see right here, and basically creates all the users and default passwords for them. So if we take a look at the script that I wrote to create and install the domain controller functions and features, you can see the first line, first couple lines actually, talks the user through what they would like to type in, and will configure the various parameters for the installation based on what they typed in, what they want the name of the domain to be, whether it's a .org or a .edu, things like that. This is also what the picture looks like and what the user is seeing as they're working with the script. This blue line here adds the management tools feature if it's not already installed, and this red line here essentially performs the installation of the Active Directory roles and features, promotes it to a domain controller, and configures the various default settings for storage. And this is the script that I wrote that adds the users to Active Directory, and the yellow portion of the script essentially just pulls all the names, pulls the parameters for the users, and this long blue line here creates the email addresses, the first name, the last name, the username, the default password, and also enables the account. Now this next part of my domain controller is the group policy management editor, and what I do in here is I edited a couple group policies so that any machine that is joined to the domain automatically knows exactly where the WSUS server is, and it will immediately connect and install and download updates upon being added to the domain, which is really great for automation because it would certainly be frustrating having to change all the settings for each and every virtual machine that's added to the domain. This next server is my Exchange server. It is currently running on Exchange 2013 and is running on Windows Server 2012 R2. And I'm actually on my laptop right now, but I'm connected through Outlook to the IP address of it. I don't quite have it set up with DNS. I wish I had more time to do that, but here's my guide for everything. It was certainly the longest process to make this server due to all the prerequisites that I had to install, and Exchange in and of itself is not actually a role that you install. It's quite a long file, but nonetheless, this is a login for one of the Active Directory users, and we can see that I received an email from the administrator. So we can go ahead and we can send a new email. We can see that it auto-completes suggestions for us, and we can take a look to see if maybe Tom would pop up in any of the directories, and we can see that there's no match. Now we can try another name here and see if it matches someone else's name. See if it auto-completes that for us. Now let's go ahead and type in a name that we've never typed in before. We can see that Amelia Fernandez actually pops right up, even though we've never sent an email to that person before. And we can go ahead and send our email. And it is correctly sent to that user. If I were to log into the Outlook web app portal through that user's account, I would see that email. So this is the script that I used to pull the various parameters from that same spreadsheet of Active Directory users. Using a for each loop, it's going to pull the parameters for each user, their name, email address, what it's supposed to be, their user account, and it's going to set up the default password as well. Now this red line essentially creates the mailbox and uses all the same default settings that would be required using the parameters found above in the script. This server is my file services server, or my file server, and its essential function is to provide a shared drive that Active Directory users can connect to store their information. Now we can go to disk management and we can see that those two volumes that I created in the OpenStack dashboard are attached as physical drives and are mirrored together. Now that drive is used specifically for holding the network shared drive, which I will show in just a moment. So in Server Manager, we can see the path to the shares folder, which is called shares under the rated drive, and we can also see a quota on the right side of the screen set for each folder. Now if we look at each folder, we can see a list of all the possible folders for each individual user on Active Directory, and this was created using a script pulling from the same spreadsheet that holds the users on Active Directory. And we can see these special permissions that are set for each specific user's folder and just for that user, whereas other domain users only have standard read permissions. Now if I go back to my domain controller, I can try to run the script and see if it will try to make the folders. And we can see here that it already checks to see if the folder has been previously made, and we can go to the file services share from the domain controller to prove that the share does work. And here is the script that created all that. So the red portion of the script is basically just reading the parameters. It's getting the list from where the spreadsheet is, and it's also getting the list of users It's combining the first and last name together, along with a period in between, which signifies the user's name. And the green portion of the script checks to see if the folders have already been created. And if the folders have not been created, that would take us to the purple portion of the script, which goes ahead and makes the new folder, which is named exactly the same as the user's folder, and sets various access control lists for each user, which is essentially special permissions for that user's folder, using their name with read, write, and execute permissions associated with their folder. And if the folder has been made, it says that the folder has been created. This is the final server that I created, and it's a virtual machine running on the OpenStack cloud environment. It is running CentOS 7, and it is currently hosting a normalized database written in MySQL, and it's also hosting an Apache web server, which pulls together and is used by a Perl CGI program that I wrote, which was split into 3 separate Perl CGI programs that all interact with the database, as well as the Apache web server. So we can take a look at the database here and show the tables. And we can look at one of the specific tables, which adds the student IDs and the class IDs together. And we can see a list of student IDs that have various class IDs, and the student IDs and class IDs represent class names and student names. So we can go ahead and we can go to the website and add a new student. So we can just add a generic student named John Smith. And let's make him a sophomore. So we can see it popped up right there. We can go ahead and choose our classes and select John Smith. Let's add fundamentals of programming. And it sends a little message saying that the submission was complete. Next, we can check our schedule and we can select John Smith, and we can see that fundamentals of programming is one of his classes. We can also check another student, say for example me, and I can see that I have a list of classes. And these are all CIST classes for the 2018 spring semester. And all the codes and the guides for everything that I did in this video is available on my WordPress website, which is douglaselliottopenstack.wordpress.com. This was a really great experience to be able to work with the cloud environment and to create virtual servers and to basically create a virtual campus for my graduation project. Thank you.